In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use 3D Revolve. And you can revolve a lot of different shapes to create different objects. And as you can see on this page, I have revolved trees. And I'm going to actually show you how to make a 3D tree because we're going to be doing a 3D map. And you may want to put trees in your map. And anyway, I've got a few different types of trees, something more simple, something that's got a lot more detail. These two are rendered using the classic 3D. And what I mean by that is, I rendered these before the newer versions of 3D came along. And if you go up under Effect in 3D, you'll see there's all the extrude and bevel, revolve, inflate, rotate, materials, and then you got 3D classic. And if your computer is running slow, if you have an older computer you're trying to do this on, and the 3D Revolve is really slowing it down, you could try and use a classic 3D, okay, which is not that difficult to use. So anyway, like I said, I'm going to show you how to actually make a tree and a set of and a little forest here, as I have set up. And like I said, you could revolve all kinds of things. We can make lamps. We can make bottles. I talked about that in my introduction to the class, how I still use Illustrator to this day. If I have a bottle that I need in my illustration, I will actually go into Illustrator and revolve it. Make a shape, revolve it, light it, and then I export it out as a Photoshop file. And I can take it into Photoshop and paint on it, but I can also take that Photoshop file and put it in Procreate and then add it to a painting, okay? You typically, when you revolve something, you're revolving shapes with open paths that I should point out, okay? But you can also revolve strokes, and in this case, I have this just a line, okay? And it revolves, and when it gets revolved, it makes kind of this martini glass, okay? With same thing for this goblet. And one of the things I like about it is it actually renders out this little line here, becomes a surface in this goblet for our water. I'm going to show you how to make this, okay? This is a eyeliner or whatever. It's a makeup applicator. I had a student at the Art Institute. They were working on a project for 3D, and they thought, well, gee, I'd like to do this applicator. And I said, well, what does one look like? So they sent me a picture. And so I actually made this shape here. As you can see, it's got a lot of different little, it's got a line here, then it's got those little lines coming out there. I did those with blends, by the way. And when you revolve it, you get this. I really think it's really cool looking, So there's all kinds of things you can get when you revolve stuff. You can even get flying saucers and UFOs, okay? And this is using the newer 3D. This is using the older classic 3D, okay? That's newer 3D. That's older. But anyway, let me just show you the basics of 3D before I jump into our exercise with the trees and the goblet. I'm going to click on this shape here and create a chess piece, a pawn, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to go to Effect and 3D and Revolve. And, my problem is I typically draw the left side of a shape, but when we do this, we can actually see it says offset direction from. We can change that to the right. And therefore, it'll revolve it this way, and it creates our pawn. And then we can go into our lighting and play around with it. And we can also go into materials, and we can make this more metallic. So we'll start to get a highlight, okay? And we can leave it like that, but we can also render it out in 3D. So and that is using this function right here, render settings. Wireframe does this, by the way, and I got to hit render before we can see it. So you can actually create a wireframe and export that out if you want to. I'm going to do ray trace, okay? And I may have said this before in a tutorial, but I'm just going to use low quality because high quality really slows down everything, and I don't need this to be high def, because we're just viewing this on on your computer monitor, or you might be viewing this on your phone. So I'm going to hit render here, It'll take a second, and that's what it looks like with it rendered out. Okay, and when it's rendered out, we can still adjust lighting. It may slow it down. See, it took a second before it slowed down, but that really looks nice. Okay, so anyway, let's get started here. Let's go to File and New, and that's what you're going to need to do is create a new letter-sized document, CMYK, raster effect settings. When we're using CMYK, it's going to be, we should set that for 300. If it's RGB, set that for 300 because we're going to be using a Gaussian blur to create a cast shadows, and Gaussian blurs use a raster effect, and if you set it too low, then it gets really choppy, chunky. It looks pixelated. All right. So let's do create. So what you're going to need to do first is you're going to need to bring up your rulers. Command R or Control R, depending on if you're on a PC, it would be Control R. But Command R, if you're on a Mac, brings up your rulers. And when you have your rulers, we can bring over a guide. I think having a guide will help you in doing this tree here. So what I'm going to do is go over to the side ruler and drag out a vertical guide here. And, guides are very useful if you're trying to draw things. I want to make sure this guide is locked because I had to restart this tutorial because my guide wasn't locked. And the shape I was drawing was attached to it. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to So I just locked it, so now it's just going to stay in place. Anyway, the way we're going to draw this tree is I'm going to click on the guide here, and then I'm going to come down at an angle like this, and click, and then hold my mouse button down and drag out and get a curve like that. And then I'm going to come back and kill that second handle by deleting one of those Bezier curves, and then I'm going to actually go and come in at this angle like this. Now we can't see anything that I'm drawing because there's no color in it. So if you go over to your color palette, make sure your fill is set on top, and you can come down here to the CMYK spectrum and just pick out a green, okay, like that. Now I'm going to come down at an angle here and curve it again a little bit. Come back and kill that second handle, and then I'm going to come in like this. Now I probably will have to actually go back and fix things, okay? Because usually, it's kind of hard to draw a perfect tree the first time around. And since I'm not tracing on top of anything, it makes it very difficult. So I'm going to come back, kill that handle, and then I'm going to go all the way back to the line here, or the guide that is. And then I'm holding on my shift key so it keeps it straight up and down. I mean, it's going to go straight horizontal. All right? So we get this shape now, okay? We're not going to close our path. I went to my direct selection tool here just so I can take a look at this tree. We can actually move things, and I'm going to drag over these 2 points so I can make this maybe a little taller here. Maybe this goes a little shorter. I'm just playing around here. Maybe I'll drag over these 2 and make our tree a little smaller this way. I'm going to click on this point and maybe bring it down. Or maybe I like it up like that. All right, so this doesn't look bad for a tree. A general kind of evergreen type of tree. So next, what I'm going to need to do is get my pen tool and make another shape. But I'm actually not going to use my pen tool because I'm going to show you a situation here. Because this is an open path, we need to make our trunk set right next to this tree or right on top of it. And if I click, it's going to actually click on that path, and therefore this is going to be connected, okay? So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to use my direct selection tool before I use my pen tool and select this bottom line here, do copy, Command C, and paste in front. So we're just copying that line, okay, by copying and pasting in front. And then I'm going to get with my direct selection tool, I'm going to click on this anchor point here on this side. And then I'm just going to use my left arrow key on my keyboard and drag that in like this. Now when I get my pen tool, and P is a keyboard shortcut for that, I'm going to go to this anchor point here and click. And now I'm on that. And then I'm going to come down at an angle slightly and curve it. And then come back and kill this second handle here. And then I'm going to go straight across. I'm going to hold down my shift key. And then we'll make this kind of a brownish shape here. I'm just going to add some magenta to it, so it's kind of brownish. Okay, and this will be my tree, and I'm actually going to make it a little smaller. I'm going to take these two shapes and group them together. Command G will group them, okay, or Control G, and let's just make this just a little smaller. I'm going to hold on my Shift key here so it does it in proportions, because we're going to make a forest, and we don't need this to take up the whole page. So once you make this shape, then we can go to Effect and 3D and Revolve. And there it revolved it. Now, because I drew it from this side, from the right side, and this is offset direction is set for left edge, that works fine, okay? Now, you can play around with rotation. We really won't need to, but we can take a look at different types of rotations. We can view this from the front, which looks interesting, The back is interesting because you see the shadows. We see the shadow side, okay? The right, the top. See, we get something like that. Which was really kind of cool. Now we can use one of these presets, and then we can play around with rotating it. I'm just playing around here because you can rotate your tree or shapes in any manner you want to. I'm going to usually make it off center. If it's off axis front is what I'm going to use, and that's what I've been using. But also you could use isometric if you want to use isometric. So anyway, I'm going to use off axis front. I was just playing around with perspective. I don't think we need to use perspective on this. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is just, the lighting's not bad. It really isn't. We could probably use this lighting as it is, but I like to go over here to this palette here. We got standard. We got diffuse. Okay, that's what diffuse looks like. Top left and top right. Let's go back to standard here. And I'm going to go to this little circle here and just move it and, adjust my lighting. I'm pretty happy with that. It doesn't have to be anything specific, and I kind of like the way this looks. Now, we can render this out, or we can keep it as is. It depends upon what you want to do. I don't care one way or the other. But if I render this out, like I said, if you do it high, it may run your computer fairly slow. I just use low because we're not doing this in ultra high def, okay? And we'll just take a look. We'll render this. And I'm just curious. Takes a second. It puts some highlights on it. I really don't mind the way this looks. It's got kind of a plastic look to it, which I think is kind of cool, But if you don't want the plastic look, you can play around with it more. We can take this off, and see you don't get a plastic look. You can go to your materials here, by the way. And, of course, if you want it to be even more metallic looking or more plasticky looking, you can up your metallic here. I'm just playing around and see what we get here. I actually kind of like that, but you know what? I'm going to just drag this out. Now, usually I will click on and off of my render because when I do something to it, it takes it a second. Let's see about making it rougher. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that gets rid of those highlights. If you don't like those highlights, is by making it rougher. I like that. Okay, I'm gonna settle on this. Now, once we make our tree, I'm gonna have you do this. Okay, we're gonna take our tree, and we're gonna go and bring up the symbols palette. I'm gonna close this 3D Revolve. By the way, if you ever need to adjust this, and if you hear the buzzer, that's my dryer going off. I apologize for that. It's going to go off a couple of times here while I do this. But anyway, what I was going to say is, if you want to go back in and fix anything, you want to go over to your appearance palette, which is in your properties, okay? And if you don't know where to get to that, if your appearance palette is closed, you can always go over here. But here is 3D materials. If we click on that, it pops this back up, and so now you can rework on it, okay? If you ever want to take it off, you can just hit the trash can, and it takes it off, okay? I'm going to undo that because it's re-rendering it, and now I'm going to close this back up. All right, so what I was going to tell you is we want to bring up our symbols palette. Mine is already up. If yours is not up yet, you can go up under window and look for it up under here, and you'll find symbols. Okay, we're going to make a symbol like we were doing for our side of our houses. Okay, and we're going to drag this in here. I'm going to make it a graphic symbol, and a static symbol, and we could have named it tree, but I'm not. And there goes my buzzer again. I apologize. So anyway, let's continue on. I want to show you how would we make a forest fairly quickly with this one tree. And we're going to use and this is over here, this is our symbol sprayer tool, okay? And the keyboard shortcut for that, if you want to get to it quickly, is Shift S. And when we click and drag over, see, we can make a forest. And I just undid that. And I just want to play around here, see what I can get here. And so now we got kind of a forest here. And I'm going to leave this as is. You can just play around with it a little bit more. But I'm going to show you some other tools up under here. So if we go to up under here, we've got the shifter tool, which will allow us to move things. Okay? And there's all kinds of tools up under here. I'm going to show you the shifter tool for one reason, and that is, you see, when it sprays it, some of these symbols are in back and they need to be in front. Well, if we hold down Shift and Alt and click, or Shift, there we go. I'm holding. If you just hold down Shift, that brings them to the front. If we need to bring anything to the back, let's bring this to the back. We hold down Shift and Alt, and then move that. And see, it moves that to the back. I'm going to do that over here to this one. So we're just kind of trying to stack these correctly here. Maybe this one comes forward. There we go. I like that. Okay, now bring that to the front. That's sitting on top of that. I'm just looking at them all to see if they're correct. And that doesn't look bad. Okay, now, we can actually play also with, there's a scruncher, which will scrunch them up. And I think if you hold down the Alt key, you can take them and spread them out more. Okay, like that. I'm going to undo that. Then we've got this one, the sizer. I'm not going to go into many more of these. I think I'm just going to show you the sizer, but you can play around with these other ones later. The sizer, I think, is important because you can actually make some smaller or larger. And so if we hold down our Alt or Option key, see, we can make some of these smaller here. And that one looks like that needs to get brought to the front. I'm just playing with them so that they kind of look like they're in the distance a little bit. And I kind of like that, the way that looks. Now we might want to just click on that and bring that a little larger. But let's go back to I'm going to go back to my shifter here and hold down my Shift key and bring that to the front there. So we have that. And then let's go back to my size. I'm just playing around with this until I get it to the way I like it here. All right, maybe that's too small. Yeah, it goes so fast sometimes. All right, I kind of like that. That's not bad. Maybe make this one a little bit larger. Yeah. All right. So once you get your forest, then what we can do is we can make some cast shadows for this so they look like they're sitting on the ground, okay? And so one thing we could do is we could just make a new layer here. And this new layer will bring up underneath our layer. So I'm in my layers palette, by the way. If you don't have your layers palette, bring it up so you can do this. And so I placed the second layer 2 up underneath it. I'm going to lock this for the moment so that I don't upset these existing symbols here. And in order to make a cast shadow, we'll go down to layer 2 here and just draw out an ellipse. Okay, like this. And we need that ellipse maybe just a little bit bigger, a little bit wider than that right there. I'm looking at the bottom of that tree. And then we can take this and let's go over to our color palette and we'll just make it a gray. So I'll I'll click on black and then just make it a gray. And if we want to, we can add some color to the gray because that's the thing is usually gray has a little color to it. And so I'm adding a little bit of magenta and cyan. And now what I want to do is, well, before I do it, I'm going to go and just make all these before I. And the way I'm going to do it is just by clicking and dragging and holding it on my Alt key before I do the Gaussian blur. Okay. So I'm just going to make a few of these, and as they go back in space, they're going to get a little smaller. Okay. We might not even see much back here. I'm just imagining that we could see some of that. Over here, we've got this one here, and then that one definitely needs to get smaller. And I'm holding down my shift key to make it smaller, but you can also, maybe make it shorter too. As it goes back in space, it would get shorter as far as the height of this ellipse. And we want all these ellipses sort of setting over this way because our light source, when we shaded this, was coming down this way. So therefore, we cast a shadow this way, okay? And you can use, there's a cast shadow function in the 3D, but it never does this, okay? It never makes it look like what I'm doing here. And this looks a lot better than what you would get if you're using that function in your 3D Revolve. So once we get our shadows, then we could take them all. And mind you, that top layer is locked. So I've got this. Oh, since we got this lone tree here, we might as well put a lone shadow for it. And like I said, I'm just dragging the ellipse and holding down my Alt key and then letting go of my mouse button, and therefore it duplicates it. All right, so now that I've duplicated these all and I have enough of them, let's take them all. We'll just do Command A because they're all in the same layer. And we're going to go to Effect, and we're going to go to Blur, Gaussian blur. And we're going to put a Gaussian blur on there, okay? Now, the thing is, the smaller the shape, then the smaller the blur. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking at my smaller ellipses, and I'm going to set this to maybe something that looks good for the smaller ellipses, like that. And then what we can do is we can adjust it for the ones that come up close. So like this ellipse here that's closer, and this ellipse here which is closer, we'll take both of those, even this one right here. We can take those and we can click on Gaussian blur, because if you go up under here and go blur again, it's going to do this. This will apply another instance of this effect. To edit the current effect, double click the name of the effect in the appearance palette. So that's what it's telling you is come over here, and you don't have to double click, you can just click and it brings it up. Because if you don't, then you're going to be adding another Gaussian blur to your shapes. And if you keep adding them, it will slow your computer and your whole thing down, okay? I've had that happen with students in the past where they would have like maybe 15 blurs on their shapes because, you need to adjust them. So now I can go here and make these a little bit more blurry. Maybe this one gets a little bit more blurry too. But anyway, we're really done here. I think this will kind of help you out here. And so that looks okay. Yeah. And if we want to get rid of our guide so we don't see it, we can hide our guides. We can go up under here, guide, and hide guide. And so we don't have a guide anymore. But anyway, we'll title this, because you're going to be submitting this file, and then I'm going to show you how to make the goblet here. We're going to go to Save As, and save it on your computer, and then name it. You can see all these recordings, how many times I've tried to do this recording today. I'm going to save it as put your last name, and then put trees, Trees, okay? And then submit that for this part of the exercise, okay? So now let's go and make the goblet. And we're going to go and make a new page here. And we're going to go create letter size page, 300 pixels per inch for those raster effects if we need those. And we're going to bring up our rulers again, Command R. And then we're just going to go over here like this and bring over our ruler. It could be in the middle of the page or wherever you want. Because this is the only thing we're going to make on this page. And I'm going to start to draw out. I'm going to draw it from the opposite way this time on the right side. And this is going to be an open path, and this is going to be a stroke. So as I'm drawing it, I'm going to actually adjust this in just a second here. So I'm going to make a shape kind of like this. So I come down at an angle. I'm getting close to that guide. Maybe you're about right there. And then I'm going to click and hold down so we get kind of it's like half of a U shape, okay? Something like that. I'm going to turn off my fill, go over to my stroke, and we're going to make it a yellowish stroke like that for the moment. Maybe not so much. Maybe I'll put a little bit magenta. We'll see what that looks like. Anyway, I'm going to go back and kill this second handle like this. And then I'm going to go up under it and come down at an angle. Okay, we're not going to touch the guide yet, because actually, we want to get close to the guide, but not too close, okay? Because we're making a stem next for this goblet. And I'm just kind of coming up here, undoing it a bunch of times until I like what I've got. All right, I can live with that for the moment. We'll come back, kill that second handle, and then we're going to come down here at a little bit of an angle, and then curve that out like that, and then come back and kill that second handle, and then we'll actually do this where we get this little indentation. So I come at an angle, and then pull, and then we're going to come out here again, and then you see I kind of lined it up with that. If yours doesn't line up identical, don't worry. Plus, you can always go back. Anyway, hold down your shift key if you want to. But anyway, as long as it's straight across, that's the main thing. All right? And so we want to come in and touch or actually click on this guide, okay? We might want to make sure our guide is locked too, because, that's the thing, is it may have come in. Yep, it's not locked. So, it is locked. Good. Because it remained locked from the other one. All right, so let me go and get my selection tool here just so we can see this. So if you need to make any changes to this goblet, now is the time, if you want to play around with the shape of it a little bit more. I'm just playing around for a second. And maybe I get something like this. We'll pull this down just a little bit like there. Okay. All right, so now what I'm going to do is we're going to draw another line. I can use my line tool if I want to, or you could just use the pen tool. But your line tool just draws, lines straight across. I'm going to draw a line straight across from the goblet to meet the guide like that. And this we're going to put in a different color. I'm going to bring the yellow all the way down and just bring up my blue, And I'm going to have a little magenta with it, too. Something kind of like that. And this is all set to, if I go to my stroke palette, all 1 point, which is fine. All right, so we have something like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to select both of those, and we'll group them. And then we're going to go to Effect and 3D Materials, and we're going to go to Revolve. Now, it looks weird, but that's because this is offset from the left edge. We're going to do it from the right edge. And there we go. Look at that. That looks really cool. And I love how it draws that inside thing there. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. But I'm going to make this isometric left, I think. That's what I kind of had the last time. And we can also play with the perspective too, so we get something kind of like that. All right. So now let's go to our lighting here, before we go to our materials. I don't know if I'll need to do my materials, but we're going to adjust our lighting and let's just render it and see what it looks like. I'm going to hit this render with ray tracing again, and we'll see how it renders it. It may do a nice job, or I may need to make some adjustments. It's not bad. I could probably live with this, but if we want to, we can go up under our materials here. I'm going to turn off the tracing because I'm going to play around with materials for just a second here. And I'm not going to add a material. I'm going to go down to the properties here. And we're going to make this a little bit more metallic. So that's going to make it much more shiny. And then we're going to hit this tracing thing again, this little icon, which will actually render it out. Okay. Ooh, I kind of like that. But anyway, you can keep playing with this. I'm not going to play with it too much longer here because it's eating into this other things that you need to do. I've got other tutorials for you to watch. Um, but anyway, and we can also add another light if we want to. Okay, so we want it really kind of bright over here, and we can play with how soft it is or how hard it is. I'm gonna hit this and see what it looks like. See what it did to it. That's interesting. Okay. Anyway, this is what you're going to need to submit. You can keep playing with the lighting on it, but we're going to save this as, and you can leave your guide on, or if you want to turn your guide off, you can go up under View and Guides. And by the way, uh, let's see what our keyboard shortcut is. Uh, it's Command and it's semicolon. That's what you use for hiding your guides. And we're going to go to Save As once you get your goblet finished and you like it. And then we're going to go and save this as, you put your last name on it. Moyers is not your last name, but that's mine. We can call it Goblet or Chalice, as I was calling it before, because that's how I wrote it up in the assignment sheet. So we'll call it Chalice, okay? And then we'll hit Save. And so you'll submit that with your trees and your other files for this exercise, okay?